Troy Lamel Stovall, welcome to Partnering Leadership. I'm thrilled to have you in this conversation with me.
Mahan, I appreciate you having me. I feel very honored given the previous guests you've had, so I feel very honored to be here today.
And future guests will feel honored because I've had a chance to have a conversation with you, Troy. I love a lot of your personal story and what you've been able to accomplish and what I know you will do in this region leading TEDCO. But before we get to any of those, would love to know whereabouts you grew up and how your upbringing impacted the kind of person you've become, Troy.
Yeah. Wow, it's how do you structure that one? So, I'm a Texan. So for those that are listening that are here in the DMV, that makes me a Cowboys fan, and so
Boo!
you just got to accept that. That's literally they pump that into your blood cells when
I
you're born.
liked you up to this point of the conversation, Troy.
But grew up in Houston, and grew up. I think a key to getting questions. I think two fundamental pieces, or three maybe. Grew up Catholic. Catholic from went to Catholic school from pre-kindergarten to 12th grade, and to the point, Mahan wanted to be a priest. Wanted to be a priest. I think that's one. I think two. It's tied to the being Catholic. My parents got divorced when I was in the 6th grade, and dad was still around, but back then, getting divorced in a Catholic church was a mortal sin. And I never forget. I literally hid it for a year from my friends. I was ashamed that my parents had gotten divorced. And the third defining event, my sister, God rest her soul, is deceased now, had sickle cell. And for the viewers who don't know, sickle cell is a disease afflicts primarily African Americans. And it's an interesting thing about it is that it came about from with Africans as a protection against malaria. But as they were transported here for slavery, it mutated into, because malaria wasn't a thing, it mutated into a sickle, and literally, again, I'm nobody's doctor, but our cells are kind of an oval donut shape. And what sickle cell does, it changes your blood cell to more of a sickle shape or a quarter moon shape. And so think about that for a second. If you're going from this to a quarter, that's less oxygen. And then it creates some significant issues, and there still is no cure. They pretty much just treat and so what I saw, my sister and I were born a year and a day apart from one another. You thought we would have been one grade level apart, but we weren't. We were 2 grade levels because for 1 full year, my sister was in the hospital. They released her for Thanksgiving, released her for Christmas, but she was in the year, so that caused us to be 2 grade levels apart. And I'd never forgotten, Mahan, she had like 103-degree fever for like 3 or 4 days, and all they could do was put her between 2 coil mattresses, to cool her off, and so to see that was to see that experience, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. It frames you. I think I said 3. I have to add one more because it's you see I have this hyphenated name. So I grew up again with my single mom. My dad was around. My dad is Richard Stovall. He went and got remarried, had with some kids with his wife, and then had a stepkids. Come to find out when I was 18 years old that Richard Stovall was not my biological father. Robert Lamel Williams, who I met, came home. This was during my Christmas break from my first year at college. I came home early. My mom didn't think I was coming to the house. Met this guy named Robert. She wakes me up 2 or 3 days later. This was right after Christmas, and tells me the story about this guy named Robert, who she was dating in Galveston, which is where I was born. And my mom's family didn't like Robert. They literally ran him off. And to cut to the chase of the story, so Robert finished high school number 2 in his high school, just like I did. Robert ran track, just like I did. Robert is a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, just like I am. Robert found out when he was also 18 years old that someone else was his biological father, a Sidney Lamel. So he hyphenated his name to be Lamel Williams. So that is why I have Lamel Stovall as my hyphenated name.
Wow, what an incredible story of finding out that biological father and honoring him also with the name as he did with his father, and the love you had for your sister. So, how did that impact your view on humanity and relationships as you were growing up, Troy?
So when I finished high school, as I just mentioned, I finished number two in my high school class, salutatorian. And by the way, my high school, St. Thomas, who I love, actually, I'm going down for my anniversary, my reunion here in a few weeks, going down. All boy Catholic high school, very well known there. Well known across the country, and graduated a number of very prominent youth. Matter of fact, at that time, the mayor of the city was an alum, and it sits in the area of town. I grew up basically in the hood. And it sits in an area of town of Houston called right outside of River Oaks. And River Oaks is probably one of the richest neighborhoods in the country. So I got elected the first Black student body president of this high school. So, and I also got to be the salutatorian. I was the top student athlete. So I got to deliver the salutatorian address. And the motto of our high school, Mahan, is teach me goodness, discipline, and knowledge. So as part of my speech, which I did not tell my mom, and this is back in what, 82, yeah, she had an old recorder and she's recording an old cassette recording and, trying to tape this thing. You can hear sniffling through it because what I'm talking about, I said, this is goodness, discipline, knowledge is what, but I told her that I believe there are two other things that have to drive towards success. And I was talking to my classmates, and I said, that is strength and courage. And strength is that thing that allows you to do that which you don't think you can, and courage is that thing that helps you keep on keeping on. And what I say, Mahan, is that having someone in your life that demonstrates strength and courage is an important piece. And that person for my life is my sister, Tracy. So I tell the story of sickle cell. And you hear my mom sniffling and crying. And so that seeing her struggle and doing that always has driven me to do the things that I have done. Again, we'll talk about it here more. Both my sister and my mom are both deceased now, and those elements and those times, I still remember how much they both meant to me. Because I actually have a picture here that my wife turned a photograph that I have into a painting. This is just a beautiful painting of the three of us. And that was my family unit, and they're both gone now. And so to answer your question, that strength and that courage, and I'll mention one other one a little bit later when we talk about the next event, help define who and what I am. Because it is every day we have to wake up. What I do every day, Mahan, is I do two things. I wake up and I look at all 10 of my fingers. I'm a person of faith, and I say, thank you, God, I can still move them. And I count to 10. I count to 10 backwards. Thank you, God, I can still do that. And then I say, I pray that I fulfill the purpose you have for me today.
What a beautiful way to talk about the importance of both that gratitude and that purpose, Troy. And having seen your relationships and your desire for impact in the community, now I know more of where that fire comes from. So with that fire, you then chose to study electrical engineering. I think it sounds like you wanted to become an astronaut or something like that, having grown up in Houston. What is that all about? Here you are, star athlete, second in your class.
Yeah, it's a great story. So I, again, dating myself, we were dating myself. So when I was in high school, I actually worked for the Johnson Space Center. And I was working there when we were dropping the shuttle off the top of 747. So it had never taken flight. It was still driving on 747. I wrote a little bit of code, nothing special, just a little bit of code that they let me do. And the code, by the way, was written on old IBM mainframe computers with punch cards. You got to do your punch cards with batch, and oh man, that's a whole podcast just on that. Believe me, I have seen the evolution of computing. Okay, let me tell you. when my little iPhone here has more computing power than that freaking mainframe that I had, I was dealing with. I tell my kids, y'all don't understand. When I was growing up, people had these things called modems, and if you had a 2400 baud modem, you were big time. If you had a 19.2 baud modem, you were, oh my God, who are you? 19.2? Come on. So I go to SMU, Southern Methodist University, and at that time, SMU has a minority co-op program. And so they have a general co-op program, the co-op program is a 5-year program. I actually went the whole 5 years. Most people didn't. Every other semester you were working or going to school. And so what they did with people of color and women, you started the summer before you even started at SMU. So literally 2 weeks after I finished high school, I'm moving to Dallas. My dad takes me up. He literally drops me off, gives me some money. There's no cell phone. I remember calling Mama on the payphone. Mama, he just dropped me off. I have no clue what's going on. So I get they bring us all together. It's like 30 or 40 of us, and they tell you, they say, okay, you're gonna talk to these 10 companies, but you got to pick your major. And so I was like, who makes the most money? They said electrical engineering. That's what I'm signing up for. I had no clue. So I will tell your audience, I am the world's worst electrical engineer. I don't mess around with hardware. So, and by the way, in school, I had the best study partner, David Sanford. I still stay in touch with him. I hope to see him in a few weeks. He was perfect for hardware. I love software. I had this mind that understood software. So I ended up working for an old division that doesn't exist anymore, for Rockwell International. It was called the Collins Transmission Systems Division. CTSD was in Richardson, Texas, and right outside of Dallas. And at that time, this was getting pre-internet. This was when they had the microwave radio stations, right? And the hops, they call the hops. And literally to check on each of those hops, you had to have somebody, mostly a guy, what's called windshield time, literally driving in between each of those stations to check on, making sure the signal was still good and the equipment was good. And that's a very expensive, thing. So we developed some hardware that allowed you to do remote control monitoring through a telemetry channel of the signal and the work. So I was part of the team that wrote this first software for this, and it just was intuitive to me. I'd never really developed this kind of, and again, I'm gonna name something else for somebody who had to go get a YouTube on. We did this software on a Digital Equipment Corporation, or DEC, PDP VAX 11. Again, half y'all folks don't know what the heck I'm talking about. I get it, but trust me, and these things were called mini computers, okay? They were called mini computers, but they were like little refrigerators. And I got to the point, Mom, with the software. I went through multiple. They actually put me on the hardware team. I failed miserably. They realized, keep him on the software team. He's really good there. I end up I co-wrote with a number of the folks the first 2 or 3 versions, and they let me write the last version I wrote myself. Ended up becoming the technical support person for it. But it was through that opened my eyes and created the pathway that I'm on now. Because I'm doing this, I'm doing all this work. And I realized I'm writing the software. I had those old floppy disks. I'm burning everything on those big floppy disks, sticking the Rockwell name on it. I'm writing the technical manual, blasting it all up. And we ship it out, and I know the selling price. So I know what they're paying me. I know a little bit of add-on costs, but then I see what they're selling it for. It's like, there's a whole big difference here. Something I don't understand about economics, and I didn't. I'm saying something about economics here. I'm losing something happened here. And I will tell you, that put me on the path of, I need to understand this thing called business a little bit more, because just being an engineer clearly ain't getting it done. So that's how I got on the path to eventually getting my MBA.
Yeah, but before getting your MBA, though, you went to Stanford, outstanding school, to get your master's. Why did you do that?
So what happened after I was finished is I was involved with a group called the National Society of Black Engineers, NSBE. Actually, NSBE is such a fundamental part of my life. Some of both my best men at my wedding, my wife I met through NSBE. All my friends I met through. I was a national officer for a number of years, served on the alumni board and the national board for a number of years. And so, but again, it was my 5th year at SMU in Dallas. I was a national chair for our national conference, huge conference. We put it on. And by the way, NSBE is a student-run, student-managed organization. Back then, we really were student-managed. We have a national office now. We did not have that back when I was there, and so we did a lot of the work. So I messed around and got so busy with that, didn't think about what my exit plan, was going to be. And so I knew I wanted both my technical master's and my MBA. So I'd applied to a couple of MBA programs like Chicago and I think a few others, and gotten accepted to 1 or 2. But a lot of MBA programs back then, and even more so now, want you to work a little bit before you, particularly the big ones. And so I'm sitting here in May, and I don't know what the heck I'm going to do. I'm going to be graduating. So through my NSBE connections, I had gotten accepted into Bell Labs in Naperville, outside of Chicago. And back then, this was the old Bell Labs. Again, some of y'all don't know what the heck I'm talking about. This is Bell Labs when you had the old AT&T, not this AT&T y'all got today. And it's go look it up. You'll know what I'm talking about. This was right after divestiture, which is a big part when they broke up the baby bells. And so back then, you could not work at Bell Labs unless you had a master's. You couldn't be what's called a member of technical staff unless you had at least a master's degree. So they had a program called 𝐂𝐎𝐏, 1 year on campus. They would literally send you to campus. It was a great deal. Send you to campus, pay for everything, and pay you 75% of your salary. It was a beautiful deal. It was a beautiful deal. So I get, because of NSBE connections, I get accepted into the Stanford's program, but there was a but. I want to do it in computer science. And Stanford's told Bell Labs, and look, nobody has ever done the switch from electrical engineering to computer science because you got all the prerequisites, and he doesn't have all the prerequisites. It's going to take him more than, Stanford's on a quarter system. It's going to take him more than 4 quarters to get it done. Y'all need to guarantee him a 5th quarter to get this thing done. Bell Labs like, fine. No, like that, who cares? Money is rounding here. So they guarantee me the 4 quarters. So it's another part of the story, but those 4 quarters were the hardest academic time in my life. That was just brutal pain because I'm taking courses out of sequence with one another. I ended up finishing in 4 quarters actually. And so I stayed the 5th quarter and just hung out. And took some class. But the funny part of the story is the drive from Chicago to Stanford. So I'm in my old hoopty. I got an old Toyota Corolla, and I'm driving with a friend of mine who's dating somebody in Berkeley. It's a female, so a good friend of mine. So we're driving, and we're right outside of Denver, and the car breaks down. So we go in. They tell me it's going to be a couple $1,000. The car's not even worth a couple $1,000. I'm calling my mom. She's useless. She's like, Mom, I can't deal with you. You're panicking right now. I can't deal with this right now. I got to figure this out. This is how the good Lord works, Mahan. So at the Toyota dealer, at the Toyota dealership is an SMU alum. And he falls in love with me, and I tell him my story. We work out a deal where I get a new Toyota Camry. I'm leasing a Toyota Camry because I have, quote, a job. Bell Labs calls, yeah, you got a job. Yeah, so they say I got a job. I can, so I get this Toyota Corolla. So that's not even the story. So her name is Joy. Joy and I decide, let's try luck. Let's go to this more southern ride to California as well as northern ride. So that takes us to Las Vegas. We're gonna go to Las Vegas and hang out. Well, that was a mistake because what happened. So here's a visual for your audience. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. A brand new Toyota Camry with Colorado plates, filled to the brim with stuff, driven by 2 young black people, speeding. What do you think that visual brings to your mind? What brought to mind, in reality, was 3 Utah State police officers stopping us to stop. And so I'm scared out of my mind. I am thinking I'm going to get a new Western Union commercial, call and get me out of jail. They asked to search my trunk, but Joy was driving. Joy's scared. I said, Joy, let them do it. And so let them do whatever they want. And so what really messed us up, again, this is pre-internet. So Joy hands them her Illinois driver's license. I hand them my Texas driver's license. I hand them the Colorado registration. And I tell them the story that I just told you. And the officer looks at me, this is a white dude, right? He's like, okay. And it takes forever because this is pre-internet. It's 2:00 in the morning, and they hadn't really registered the car. And, it's hours. It's hours later. The car's not registered. And so they buy the story. After about an hour, they let me off with a speeding ticket. So we go to Las Vegas. We still go to Las Vegas, and we hang out in Las Vegas for 2 days. So that's that story. So yeah, get to Stanford, do well, make some great friends, and do well academically. So then when I leave Stanford, they've moved my job from Naperville out to New Jersey. I didn't want to go to New Jersey. So the guy has a way to make you go where he wants to go. So I ended up being in New Jersey later on in my career. So I wanted to be closer to home because my sister was really experiencing some medical issues, and I wanted to be closer to help mom out. So Bell Labs, in their kindness of their heart, helped me work out. I ended up going to work for Southwestern Bell in Oklahoma, and had a pretty good career there at Southwestern Bell, and then eventually got my MBA.
Yeah, so here you are, Troy, as a young Black man who is not only studied, but done extremely well at SMU, Stanford, but you must have broken a lot of people's perceptions, and there must have been a lot of double takes, all parts of the country, not just Oklahoma, when you are this highly trained, sophisticated engineer, software engineer, SMU grad, Stanford grad. How was the world adjusting to you?
No, another great question. So Oklahoma. So I go to Oklahoma. This is again, Southwestern Bell has this program called I forget what it was called, but it was one of these management training programs. I was in a class, so got 30 or 40 of us, and the whole point was to create the next level of class of management, at Bell. And so they stuck me initially in Oklahoma City at what was called the Special Circuit Center. Again, this is pre-internet. The old T1, DS1 lines, customers like radio station, TV station would call us, and I had a crew of about about a dozen folks inside. What's called an inside crew. That could electronically figure out what was wrong, and we might have to dispatch somebody to it. The crew was all union. Mahan, most of them had kids older than I was at that time, and I never forget one of the first things I used to get in trouble all the time with the union because there were just some stupid rules. I thought they were stupid, and so like the first day I'm there, I'm in my little cubicle, but it's a little cubicle, but everybody's out on the floor. I don't know what they do. So what do? I move my desk out on the floor so I can be next to my people. So that took somebody's job, moving that desk. I was moving my desk out to the floor. I mean, what are you talking about? And so then, with overtime had to be by seniority. So that means the junior folks weren't getting it, but those are the ones who really actually needed it. So I worked out a deal with my crew. They thought it was a fair, a broader distribution of overtime. I thought my crew agreed to it, got written up by that. Somebody said, and so my crew stood behind me. But the story to answer, the two stories that answer part of your question is, I got tasked to at that time we were installing at that time the largest E911 system in the country. Again, E911 at that time was to give you the ability to see automatic number identification. Back then that was a big deal. And so it was E911. It was the whole metropolitan area around Oklahoma City, which is about 1 million people, give or take. And it must have been 30 to 40 different agencies, police departments and the like. It was a huge effort. And when I got introduced to it, it was behind budget, behind time and all that stuff. So they asked me to lead it. We ended up getting it back in budget, and we were late maybe about a week or two. It was a huge effort. I ended up getting what's called a Key Award. I was the youngest person ever to get a Key Award from Bell. So as a thank you for doing all that work, what do? They moved me to Sallisaw, Oklahoma. Now, go Google it. Sallisaw is near the Arkansas border. There in eastern Oklahoma. This is what the late 90s, and they had never seen a black professional in this town. Number one, at the time, maybe mistake on my part. Time I'm dating a young lady who was half black, half white, who could pass for being white. I had her come there to visit me. Major league mistake, but that was one of my many major league mistakes. No one would rent to me or sell me a house, so I ended up basically commuting from Oklahoma City to Sallisaw, which is about an hour. So I would stay in a hotel and go back and forth. I had a skinhead camp in the northern part of the territory the FBI had been watching for 10 years.
Wow.
And if that wasn't enough, I had a young man on the team, let's just call him Mickey, who was flat out racist. Flat out racist. So, and by the way, the crew was one of the worst performing crews in the state. And so one of the key metrics at that time in Bell is what's called repeat visits. And so, when you call a technician out and they come fix it, and if you got to come back within a certain amount of time frame, that's deemed a negative. And part of the issue was, let me tell you, Mahan, that part of Oklahoma, there's that territory that I had an extreme amount of poverty. I mean, an extreme amount of poverty. I can't begin to describe to your audience some of the conditions that our technicians, and I would do rides with the technicians that I found in some of these homes. And some of those conditions were causing issues with the telephone equipment, to the point where you had animals, urine, or roaches infestation, and just an amazing level of poverty that we have, and that was causing us issues. So I changed some rules and changed some ways which we did those metrics, and actually the team went from one of the worst to one of the best. But back to Mickey, right? So Mickey hurts his ankle or something like that. First couple of days, first week or so, and I'm in my office trying to unpack, and I did something stupid. I got mad at him, and I'm young, know nothing. So I gave him a book on Malcolm X and one on Martin Luther King. I say, I don't know if you can read or not, but this is all I want your ass to do, is to read these 2 damn books. And I get back to him. So, but what happens though in the broader context, I got called the N-word too many times. I got shot at a couple of times. I can't begin to take the level of disrespect. And so I never talked to my boss's boss, who was one of my advocates. I said, look, bro, like you just, I got a bachelor's degree cum laude from SMU. I got a master's degree from Stanford, and I'm out here dealing with this madness. I don't need this. So after about 9 months, they moved me. They moved me to South Tulsa area called Jenks, Oklahoma. And the crew, I had a crew of about 15 folks spread across 3 towns. Do you know, Mahan, that who led the celebration of me leaving, and who I stayed in touch with probably 2 years after I left? Mickey.
Wow.
Because here's the deal. That's a long way to answer your question. So much of how we view one another is either viewed through what others tell us about it, what we read about it, or what we think about it, as opposed to what we experience about it. And when we sit time, like you talked about it, and before we talked before, when you get time with somebody, doesn't matter your skin tone, doesn't matter your last name, doesn't matter what God you worship, doesn't matter, all those other things. There's so much commonness in us that we miss that, but we want to focus on all the other stuff. And that's to answer your question, that's what Mickey learned, and what I learned about him too.
Yeah, and what a beautiful example of the ability to share in that humanity and connect with each other's humanities. One of the unfortunate things I find, Troy, is that even in areas like Greater Washington, D.C., we've isolated ourselves more into our own bubbles of thought.
Absolutely.
So there are fewer people that we get a chance to truly connect with on a human level who differ from us in terms of background or experience. And that's a great way of understanding and adding to that understanding. as opposed to, you mentioned you'd given him the books on Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. I interviewed the great author David McRaney. His book is How Minds Change.
Yeah.
And he talks about the fact that, and there are lots of studies, why people resist being changed. And if anything, backfire effect, they become more convinced of their original view when they are pushed,
Exactly
as
correct.
opposed to the connection that you made. What a beautiful example. And you also mentioned that business schools in many cases want you to have business experience before going into school, because it gives you the chance to go in with these world experiences.
It's funny you bring it up. So when I went to business school, I was definitely one of the oldest ones in my second. Harvard. I went to Harvard. I went to Harvard Business School, and so they put you in these sections by 90 people, and a lot of them are still dear friends. I'm gonna see one next week when I go out to San Francisco, and so you're in this section of 90 folks, and I was definitely one of the oldest ones in there, and I have never forgotten, Mahan, to your point. So we're talking about with some case, we do case studies, and a lot of the cases are about talent and workforce and challenges, and the traditional answer for those people who did that 2 years on Wall Street is, well, just fire everybody. I said, but you just can't fire everybody. That's not a solution. That's not a solution. Although I do say I want to find a company, I haven't found it yet, that I can walk in Friday evening, fire everybody, and hire everybody Monday morning and never miss a beat. I do want that. I do want that company. I do want that company. I haven't found it yet, but I do want it. But some of the answers are just really, that's not the real world. That's just not. And so it did give me a very different perspective of how to attack some of the cases, but I built some beautiful friendships that that I still have to this day.
That's fantastic to hear that you go to a top business school, work at a top consulting firm, McKinsey. You end up at Jackson State University. What was that experience like, Troy?
So just a quick so I was at McKinsey for a number of years, and end up towards the end what's called a senior engagement manager, which is the step before. At that time, part of changed the titles, now step before being a partner. And one of the studies that we were doing was for a company called SkyTel. Again, y'all go look it up. Called SkyTel. You talking about advanced messaging? SkyTel was really the first advanced messaging company. They really were. And the founder of that company was a guy named John Palmer. So we did the study. Basically, this is the advent of smartphones. We told him he needs to sell. So I get back, and John calls maybe 6 months later. I'm in the window to apply for a partnership. And John asked me, no, you don't want to do that. You want to come, and we're going to start my family office. We're going to start a venture capital. We're going to do some venture philanthropy. We're going to do my foundation, blah, blah, blah. I said, man, you in Jackson, Mississippi. I'm living outside of Philadelphia with my wife, who was working. She's an engineer with Merck at the time. I said, man, I'm not asking my wife to move to Jackson, Mississippi. And he said, by the way, I'm taping this today. Jackson, Mississippi is in the news because they've been having massive water issues for years. He said, fine, look, I got a private jet. You can fly down. I'll pay for you to come back and forth. That's what I did. I did that for 2.5, 3 years. And one of our first donations was to Jackson State University. And I actually helped the new president at the time, a guy named Ron Mason, negotiate what became one of the largest gifts at that time to an HBCU. It was an old All-State building. We helped negotiate the transfer of that. John went out to go to Portugal to become the ambassador to Portugal. And there's actually a fun story about that we can come back to. And I started my own practice. I had a bunch of clients lived all over the planet. And Ron Mason calls me and wants me to come do some work for him, which I go and do. And then he calls me and says, I want you to come be my CFO. I said, I'm going back to my wife, and I'm skipping a bunch of the story. And she finally says, the good Lord been trying to get us to go to Jackson, Mississippi for the last 7 years. It's about time we listen to him. So I take a massive, when I tell you a massive pay cut, it's a massive pay cut. My wife leaves her job. We now have both our kids are born at this point. Our kids are named Zora and Langston. Yes, it's Ornell Hurston and Langston Hughes. That's another part of the story. And we moved. I don't even have a contract yet with Ron. I go down there on faith. I go down there. But the real answer to your question, Juan, I was there. Technically, I was there for 6 years, but I was really there for more like 8 years because I did a lot of work as a consultant. That I put that work up as some of the best work I did as a professional. We physically changed the campus. We opened up the campus physically, connected it better to the Jackson, to the white Jackson business community. The campus is flat out just beautiful. Took down a bunch of. There's a funny story about we got very innovative in terms of getting a lot of the abandoned property around the campus, and so state had a law where any foreclosed, any tax lien home didn't get paid would have 6 months that a nonprofit or university could come and get it. So I basically drew a circle around the campus, told the secretary, said any houses, that's ours, and I'm gonna take care of them. And that's what I did. I made a deal with the community. I would take care of them. And so we would go and knock down some of the really old bad ones. So I get a call from this one state legislator who didn't quite like us and like me that much. She says, "You knocked down the wrong house." I was like, "No, I didn't. I know you knocked down the wrong house." So I call my facility guy, give him the address. He goes out and looks. What's happened is the kids in the neighborhood switched addresses on the house.
Oh.
And so yes, we knocked down the wrong house. So there is literally a National Geographic, National Enquirer thing of me superimposed on a bulldozer knocking down houses in Jackson, Mississippi. This is a true story. True story. So I get into this long, obviously, lawsuit with the family to deal with the stuff and blah 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 blah. But that aside, that episode, you know, no good deed goes unpunished. I stayed in that work up, and so Ron and I have now been at 3 different institutions. So we were Jackson State together. He went to Southern. He asked me to come do some work there. Did quite a bit of work at Southern with him. And then when he went to the University District of Columbia, I was the COO there. And in between, I was the COO and Executive Vice President Howard. So I've been at a number of HBCUs. I've been blessed to be able to also consult to a number of them, as well as to a number of really big institutions like Alabama and West Virginia and a few others, California. And so that higher ed piece and the venture capital, like what's the marriage? Well, that marriage is called TEDCO. To be able to bring my technology background, my consulting background, my venture background and the collegiate background, all of those are all brewed together, Mahan, and that's what we do at TEDCO. A lot of this is what we do at TEDCO.
Yeah, your experience has been a perfect fit for this opportunity. So what is TEDCO and what role is it supposed to play while the economy and the approach to business is also changing? So we'd love to first start out with what is TEDCO?
Yeah, so TEDCO, we're 25 years old. Actually, next year will be 25 years. So we're actually in the process of beginning that celebration of 25 years. But we are the state's venture capital investment and support arm. And what that means in English is that we provide both early stage investments, and I mean investments. We use venture capital investments. We have investors these aren't grants; these are truly investments. We do early stage investments in early stage technology. We also support them, and the support piece is anything from we do everything from do you need access to an incubator? Do you need access to a lawyer? Do you need access to any talent? Do you need a 3D printer? Whatever that thing is, we do both of those. We make sure you got the funds. We also make sure you have the resources to both. And we take everything from what I call the napkin idea. We take those napkin ideas, turn those ideas into concepts, turn those concepts into firms, turn those firms into stages, turn those stages, those growth stages into scaled firms. And we take them all the way through. We have a range of venture capital firms and other institutions that we work with to partner with. We've been very, very successful, over $2 billion of impact to the state. And so our goal is to position Maryland as a place for innovation and entrepreneurship. And that is what we do. We do a pretty good job at that. I'm very excited. And I mentioned the universities. We have one part of what we do that works with our 5 research institutions here in Maryland, that being Hopkins, University of Maryland, College Park, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, University of Maryland, Baltimore, you separate Baltimore from Baltimore County. And then Morgan State, we work with their tech transfer entities to take that stuff that's in the labs, turn it, answer the question, is it commercializable? And then they come into our traditional venture portfolios for investment opportunities. So it's a very exciting organization, very small but exciting. We have over $200 million of assets under management with a plan to grow that to 4 to 5. I think the second part of your question is, the way I've been answering that, Mahan, is a trick question. So I've been asking this from everyone, from the governor to everyone else. And here's the trick question to your, and this is a situation all 50 states face. So here's the trick question. Maryland company, post a job, hire somebody in California. That person in California stays in California, does a job for the Maryland firm. That's scenario 1. Scenario 2, California company, post a job, hire somebody in Maryland to do the job. They stay in Maryland for the California company. That's scenario 2. The question, Mahan, what is the traditional definition of job growth for the state of Maryland? The answer for your audience is neither and both. Because the traditional definition assumes that, because here's the point. This COVID has exposed 2 fundamental flaws, or 2 fundamental truths that we built our whole economy, our whole society on. 2 things. 1, that Mahan's job and his place are connected. In other words, when you woke up in the morning, you got up, you had breakfast, you took your kids to school, you dropped them off, you went to work, you reversed that in the afternoon, you took them to soccer practice, for me it was swim practice, and you went home. That's fundamental truth 1. Fundamental truth 2 is, I don't care if it's a concert, a church, a school, whatever it is, whatever we do, we try to put as many people as possible in as small a space as possible. COVID has said stop on both of those things. And to answer your question, that is, and so where am I really going, is the metrics that we have used to define economic impact have assumed certain of those 2 principles. But if those 2 principles are now no longer true, what I'm telling the state, and this is every state that's listening right now, I would argue to you that the metrics you use are either telling you not the whole truth or frankly lying to you about what economic impact is. And if all you're trying to judge is how many jobs get created, I'd ask yourself, where are those people actually at that are doing those jobs? And where are those jobs actually located? And so we've got to, I think this is an exciting time for organizations like how you and I met through LGW to put a new, to think, and I'm actually trying to work with, our friends at, like at Accenture and KPG and other these really smart places. What are those metrics? What do those new metrics look like? Because I think we need a post-COVID set of metrics. I'm very passionate about this because I think if we don't figure this out, we're going to keep investing. It is going to be the definition of insanity. We're going to keep making policy and investment decisions that aren't going to bring us the impact that we're looking for. And we're going to ask ourselves, what the hell's wrong?
I love that perspective, Troy. And I think actually some of those changes were happening pre-COVID. COVID just accelerated.
Absolutely.
And made more people realize that there doesn't necessarily need to be an association between a job and a location. We've done that so much, especially as countries got more industrialized. But even though we had transitioned over the past couple of decades to more of a knowledge economy and ability to work from anywhere, most organizations hadn't adjusted, but now have to. But what I wonder is, Richard Florida, before going up to Canada, for a few years, he was a professor at George Mason University. And I remember in the late 90s, there was a regional conversation, the Potomac Conference, where Richard Florida was talking about the advantages of location.
Yep.
Partly based on Silicon Valley, which is why all around the world you have Silicon Valley East, Silicon Valley North, Silicon Valley this and that. What I wonder is, with this separation between the need for location and jobs, what impact will that have not just on the way states view this, but on the way we view this globally. Because the same way the company can be in Maryland and the person can work in California, that same job can just as easily be done anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I think your point is that, look, you and I are both here in what we call the DMV, the District, Maryland, Virginia, Northern Virginia. And talent doesn't see the Potomac River. They don't see Western Avenue. Talent moves, fluidly across that. Yet all of our constructs, like a TEDCO and like our friends in Virginia, Bob Stoley, who runs my counter organization in Virginia, Virginia Partnership, our money, he and I joke, our money stops at the Potomac, but the ideas don't, and the talent doesn't, right? But that's kind of silly, right? And so if I could have my vision, and I've been very public about this vision, I don't think we want to be a Silicon Valley East. I think there are things about Silicon Valley we want to look at, but not be. And I think it's an important distinction. But when I think about this, Mahan, when I go from Richmond to Philly, that 95 corridor, that's a significant part of the US population. You got some amazing research enterprises, universities along that stretch. You got some strength in cyber and life sciences and bio, some stuff around ag that's emerging. And so I think we need to think about that. We need to think about how we regionalize this. And I've had this conversation, and I tell people I think I can have that and still bring benefit to Maryland. I think there's a way for me as TEDCO, as the CEO of TEDCO, to talk about opportunities in DC that benefit Maryland, and opportunities in Virginia that benefit Maryland. I don't think I am being shying away from my responsibilities to Maryland. As a matter of fact, I talk about what I call the D squared MV, because I think about Delaware. I call it the D squared MV. I talk about Delaware District and Northern Virginia, because we do a lot of work on the Eastern Shore. And Delaware, again, nobody knows that boundary between Delaware and Maryland, all right? It's a line, you cross it. And so your question is, we have to, and the problem though is politicians only see a circle. They see a circle that defines their district and voters and being able to talk about that. And I respect that and understand that. But the impacts are much bigger. And so I think it's people like you and I that have to be leaders around this. Again, back to the LGWs that are here, and those that are, since LGW spawns the DMV, and looking at our friends in Richmond, our friends up in Philly, who, there's LGW sister organization in each of those areas. How do we use the LGW platform to connect and create that 95 corridor? I think that's what we have to do.
Yeah, we have to do that, Troy. Couldn't agree with you more. The same way in organizations, as you know, I'm a big I love organizational leadership. Talk to some of the smartest authors, thought leaders in the space, and organizations have uncapped their potential primarily in many instances in finding ways to get greater collaboration within the organization. So breaking down of silos, breaking down of previous mindsets. The same thing has to happen with respect to regions and that cooperation,
Right.
because the solutions of the future will not fit into the containers of thinking of the past. So we need to expand that. The challenge becomes the measures, which I know you and anyone else in a responsible role is consistently being held accountable for. However, the wrong measures will continue shrink the opportunities for all. The right approaches and right measures, getting more collaboration, will expand the opportunity for everyone.
Yeah, the summary, which is innovation, we have to have an innovation of how we think about this, and then it's not. And I don't think, and I do believe that if we can think about this differently, it will elevate the individual entities that are in it. And it is I hate the, rising tide lifts all boats. I actually do hate that term, but that is part of what we're talking about, right? And so, but we got to think differently. And until we have a different way of thinking about this, I think we have to do that. And so I am very much a part of, as different entities that exist here in the DMV area to look at this collaboration. It's tough because, here's the hard part of this. We can wave our hands and say all this. Day to day, I'm trying to get my day-to-day job done. And so you're asking me to take off some cycles of my time to go dedicate to that. And I really need a full, and yes, we have organizations that's doing that, but that's the whole point. None of them are scaled enough to do it. And the scaling exists in those entities that are focused on doing their day-to-day, which is still very regionally based type of approach. And so there's gonna have to be a truly, I hate to use this term, truly stick of dynamite that's going to have to blow something up in order to expose that the logic has to change, because it really is the definition of insanity. And you know this better than anybody. You can keep doing and succeeding for a long time. You can keep doing. Look, I named a whole bunch of companies that ain't no longer around anymore, and they kept doing and doing and doing and doing, and they ain't around no more. I just saw, I just saw the story. I was recalling the story. Someone reminded me that, again, go check it out. There used to be a company called Blockbuster. I mean, we thought Blockbuster, a Friday night trip to Blockbuster was what you had to do to go check out the new videos and stuff. And Blockbuster had a chance at one point, Mahan, to buy a little company at that time called Netflix. And they chose not to buy a little company at that time called Netflix. And now we know the story. There's no more Blockbusters. Okay, now Netflix got its own set of issues right now too, but there are no more Blockbusters.
Yeah, Troy, and that new thinking can elevate all. I had a conversation with Professor Ron Adner. He's a professor at Dartmouth, has an outstanding book, Winning the Right Game. And he talks about the need for more ecosystem thinking, which actually, to their credit for the thinking about the production of the vaccine, a part of what Alex Azar did is he had read Adner's work and thought through what would be the right ecosystem for collaboration to be able to get the vaccines out in what they called warp speed rather than the traditional approaches. So it requires an ecosystem thinking rather than traditional approaches. So I love the way you are thinking about it, because you're not looking at running TEDCO the way it has been done before. You're looking at a reinvention so we can, as a region, prosper, and
exactly
Maryland and TEDCO can play a role and prosper as a result too.
That's exactly right. And thinking differently about leadership. I love the 𝐸𝐸, the dog sled race, right? There's an article about this, but it talks about you can learn a lot of leadership from that race, from the dogs. Because if you understand the structure of those, you got that one lead dog, right? And then behind that, you have these side dogs. And then you have the rear dogs. And each of them play a role, but they're all part of the leadership team. And part of the point I'm getting at is that I think part of this ecosystem building is people have to let go of ego. And so, it's if we don't let go of the ego, then and that's what's got to happen. We've got to let go of the ego. And some people have to be the back dog. And by the way, back to the dogs, right? What happens is the front dog at some point gets pulled back and becomes a side or back dog, and another dog takes the lead because they need a different type of dog for that terrain, or that first dog gets tired. And so doesn't mean you have to carry the whole load. It just means every once in a while you're going to be put in the rear or put in the side. That's okay. You're still part of the leadership team. You're still pulling the sled. The sled is still making progress. That's what we got to be able to do.
I love that. And as I mentioned, we will chat more about it, because that's exactly what Ron Adner also keeps emphasizing. a focus on ecosystems rather than what he calls egosystems. And we've been so focused on the ego, and that ego gets in the way of
Oh, I say all the time, you can't build an ecosystem unless you get rid of ecosystems.
yes, yes.
You can't. You can't.
Outstanding. So as you're leading TEDCO, you will continue doing great things there. I want to touch on a couple of personal elements of your life
Yep.
before then wrapping up. I know back in 2020, you had a series of
2000.
back in 2000, you had a series of personal setbacks, including losing your sister, your wife's grandfather, and your
My
daughter.
Mhm.
How were you able to get through that, Troy?
Yeah, thank you. So for your audience, so this is 2020, we got through Y2K. We all thought we were gonna die from Y2K, so Y2K, we survived that. So this is the summer of 20, and so this is July of 20. And so Sonia, my wife, she's from North Carolina, and her grandfather passed. And she was very close to her grandfather. The grandfather was a fairly known Baptist minister there in North Carolina. So that was July. So we go to August, and in August, early August, my sister dies. I've already told you a story of my sister, and we had just celebrated our birthday. Our birthdays are July 18th and 19th. Again, we're born a day and a year apart. And so at her funeral, I mentioned to you about my salutatorian speech. Talked about goodness, discipline, knowledge, strength, and courage. And I repeated that speech at her funeral. But I also added one other thing that is required that I saw in my sister, and that's faith. And that is faith. I'm sure you had someone die. One of the hardest things you ever do is having to go through the belongings of someone that you love and seeing how they documented and cataloged their life and the things that they were important to them. I'm looking at Bible verses that she had turned over in her Bible, and I'm crying thinking about remembering that. But so that was August. So then in September, our daughter Camille passed away, and we didn't have Camille for long. She was Sonia had some complications, but she was born. We still have a birth certificate. We have little imprints of her feet. I could hold her in one of my little hands. I have a picture of that, and so that was devastating. At this time, I'm working in Mississippi for John Palmer. Sonia's still working at Merck as an engineer, and I'm going back and forth we live outside of Philly to Mississippi. And so I go back to work one day, go back to Mississippi, and John is there. He's been always, John just texted John 2 days ago. And how God works, how God works. So at that time, John's minister is a gentleman by the name of Reverend Chuck Poole. And Chuck Poole is one of the nation's foremost experts on loss. He's written a number of books on loss and how to manage loss. So he takes me and he counsels me, he prays with me. But Sonia really gets pretty depressed over this. And so on one of my trips to Mississippi, Sonia joins me. And I called Chuck and just say, Chuck, Sonia's here with me. He had a bunch of meetings. He canceled all of his meetings, comes to my office there in Jackson. And he sits there, he prays for us, he cries with us, he counsels us. And I will tell you to this day, our marriage would not have survived without Chuck Poole. And Chuck Poole could call me during this call right now and ask me to do something. I would tell you, I got to go, Mahan, Chuck Poole's calling. And that's the impact he's had on me and my wife. Now, she just sent me a note because I hadn't talked to him in a while. He retired. She still stays in touch with the church she's with there, and he retired. I just sent him a note last night that he congratulated him on his retirement. But if I may fast forward to 2011, so by 2011, I'm working at Howard, and my mom has remarried a guy named Sam, who we love. So Sam calls me one evening and says, I had to put your mom in the hospital from some respiratory issues. So I literally get on, this is late June. So I fly to Houston. And I see my mom. Sam's been there couple of day, a day or two. So I tell Sam go home. My mom wakes up. She asks about the kids. She loved her grandkids. And then a bunch of alarms go off, machines go off, and they kick me out, and I don't get to speak to my mom again. And I have to spend the next few weeks trying to get my mom moved to another hospital because she's in one of these regional hospitals. This is Houston. I said, let's move to the Texas Medical Center, the biggest medical center on the freaking planet. Let's get her there. That took me a week. I go home for a day to spend the 4th of July with the kids, and I get a call on the night of the 4th of July. So you got to come back home. You got a decision to make. And the part of this, and this is I close it. This is because I saw my mom for years, Mahan, stop doctors from letting my sister die. I mean, there were many times she was so sick, and my mom was like, "No, you will save my daughter." And so when I had to make the decision about my own mom, it's to this day heart-wrenching because I made the decision to terminate. But everyone keeps I had to be fair to myself because my choices were if we let her live, she would have lost at least one limb, at least one hand, been on dialysis the rest of her life, maybe lost an eye. And there was a quality of life situation, which mom never really faced that with Tracy. My sister was Tracy. And so, and that was 2011, but that put me on such a road, and I was under a huge pressure at Howard. We were doing a lot of transformational things there at Howard, and I didn't take time for me. And I would, I'm telling your audience this so they can, all of us manage loss differently. I didn't manage it well. I literally woke up one morning, my office here in the house, and my bedroom was above me. I just passed out. I literally just fell to the floor. My wife was scared out of her mind. I just passed out, and I literally just had a nervous breakdown. My body just shut down. And I look at my wife made me, I went away for a week. I went down to Ocean City. For folks that don't live here, it's not far from here, it's on the coast. And I just spent a week there in pure meditation by myself, literally turned off my phone. No one could get in touch with me for like a week. I ended up having to resign, took a leave from Howard and eventually resigning because I needed me. And I learned a lot about myself, about how I handle those things, and also how I handle other friends' losses. Now, I close on this. People always say when you lose someone, if you lost someone, people make the statement, "I understand how you feel," and they don't know it. That's a horrific thing to say to your audience because you don't understand. You can empathize, you can sympathize, but you cannot understand. Even if we both lost our mothers or our sisters or our daughters, you cannot understand my loss. It is my loss. And so I think words matter and how we comfort those around us when we go through this. And the other thing that I do is I don't send the proverbial flowers thing. I wait till a couple of weeks after the loss has happened because this is and that's when everyone's gone home, everyone's gone back to their lives, and you're left there with your loss. And so that's when I send a care package. I send food because you got to take care of you. And so I try to help invest in that person, their recovery. And I told you this before we came on, I think, there's these 7 stages. People talk about 7 stages of loss. Losses do 2 things to you. I think with the 7 stages, really, to me, they do 2 things. They either define you or they refine you. And they initially do define you. You define yourself by that loss, right? I am this. I lost my mom. You define yourself. The trigger is, do you let that stay your definition, or do you refine yourself to be what God still intends for you to be with that loss? That's the difference, and that's the challenge so many of us face that have gone through these types of grief episodes.
You have refined your own humanity, Troy. And what great advice also with respect to the fact that without us being able as leaders to take care of ourselves, as humans being able to take care of ourselves, we don't have what it takes to be able to give back to others.
Right.
So as you were going through this, it took a toll on you, but you have become a better human being and a better leader as a result of your reflections on this experience. Now, you're also impressively still athletic, Troy, the star runner. You do triathlons, which is
I try to do triathlon. Let's be clear. I try to do tries. But yes, I try to do tries.
which is incredible. Both of your kids are top level swimmers.
Yep,
So
yep.
what has your triathlon experience been like?
Trying. I love the challenge of it. I love swimming is my weakest sport, but I've gotten better. I've gotten a lot better swimming, and running is my strongest. And I've done for those that know these things, I've done what I call aqua bikes and aqua runs, and I've done I've done the two of the three. I've done a lot. I've done a lot more of the two of the three than all three. But I was planning on doing a three actually in a few weeks, but I got some buddies coming to town that weekend. I was going to do a triathlon over in Virginia, so I'll have to put it off. But I tell you folks another funnier story. So I gotten back in during the beginning of COVID. I was I thought happy hours every day because I'm at home, right? And so I'm a cigar bourbon kind of guy, and so I ain't got to worry about it. I'm just pouring the bourbon. I'm just doing it, smoking, and wasn't really working out. And I tell folks, I really thought Oreos was a food group. So I go to the doctor towards the 20, and the doctor is a buddy, and he says, we got a problem. So you overweight, blood pressure ain't that good, and cholesterol really ain't that good. So I'm here and I was at lunch with a young lady yesterday who seen me. She called me the great shrinking man. So I had lost over 30 pounds, about 30 pounds. Blood pressure's where it's supposed to be, and actually worried about it being too low. And cholesterol's fine. I tell the joke. I just had my birthday, obviously in July, and so old enough where I got to start having colonoscopies. And so I scheduled my colonoscopy for the day after my birthday this past year. Everybody's like, who does something stupid like that? I said,
Why would you do that?
like, why would you do that? I said, well, one is the doctor who does it, I know, he only does it on Tuesdays. And so the day my birthday was on a Monday. And so when I started looking at the calendar, it was going to be like November before I was going to be able to do this thing, given my calendar, given his calendar. So I was like, man, to hell with it. I'm just going to go with it. He said, you sure? I said, I do it. I'm going to do it. So I had fun up to my birthday. But the day of my birthday, anybody done a colonoscopy, you taking all that stuff and you playing to the porcelain god. You hanging out with the porcelain god the whole day. And that's what I did. But I got my results back, and my man told me, he said, I have never seen such an excellent colon. I was like, can't be mad about that, dog. So look, health matters. Health matters. You can't lead unless your mind, body, and soul are aligned. And so yeah, like I said, I wake up in the morning. That was my soul, my mind. I do stuff to keep my mind active, and I let my body go. There's no question about that.
Oh, that's such wonderful advice, Troy, because you have also shown through your own example and your stories, whether it's been in you seeking out education, or it's been in the connections that you have made with people you've worked with, or the love and care for family members, the fact that you do balance those in your life, and you're an example of what leadership should be like, most especially as you're leading TEDCO in reinventing and creating a new TEDCO and new opportunities for everyone in Maryland and in this entire DMV region and beyond. I really appreciate your leadership, Troy, and really appreciate you taking the time to share some of your personal journey. Thank you so much for joining Partnering
Well,
Leadership.
bro, thank you. Appreciate all you do, and all you have done for LGW in particular, all you do here in the region, man. Thank you. Appreciate you, and thank you for your audience for listening.